Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Coach Franco Pacheco, friend, colleague. Thanks for jumping on tonight.
Thanks. I'm honored that you threw friend in there. That's a rare one. I'll take it.
Absolutely. All right, Coach, let's dig in here. Take us through the background, ground the audience here. How did you end up coaching? What was the process? Background, story as an athlete, all of it.
Sure. So I'm a Monterey, still Seaside native, more importantly. But my dad
Side
actually
with
was,
the C too, not the SEA.
nah, let's see. My dad was a recreation coordinator for the city of Seaside. And so a lot of my youth we spent at the pool. And so by nature, I ended up in a lot of swim lessons and a lot of late hours at the pool. And so it became an easy transition. And so I started with the lessons program and progressed to a community team. I'm actually a founding member of our local club team. And so I swam there, and then swimming became a way for me to pay for college. And so I got a big scholarship to go to a school in New York called the College of St. Rose. RIP doesn't exist anymore, but it died
The
this year.
Ags, just FYI, small world, the Ags beat them in the Elite Eight when we won the national championship. Just saying.
All right, fair enough. Spitting on the grave, though. They are dead. So I'm not sure you're really winning too much there. But yeah, I spent 4 years in Albany, which was a great experience. And then I went to grad school in Hawaii, Chaminade, to play water polo, but in a program that was killed off as soon as I got there. So that was interesting. And then from there, I joined the Army, spent 4 years in the Army.
Hold
And
on.
wasn't,
Before we go into the Army, do we want
yeah,
to talk about your career as a program killer here yet? Or are we going to do that later?
no, we can dive into it later. To be clear, St. Rose died last year. So it had a good 30-year life after I left them. But yeah, no. So I joined the Army after that. And then while I was in the Army, I came back and helped various programs and friends I knew in the community. And so I got tied to swimming like that. And then when I was leaving the Army, I applied to, actually, I know the number because I know numbers, 136 coaching jobs. Only one person wrote back to me, and it was for this very poor paying job at Villanova. I won't get into the salary, but it was less than living wage. But it was beautiful. I had an amazing coach, and he got me in the door and taught me a ton. And then from there, I went to Colby. Then from Colby to Colorado College, which was probably my greatest coaching experience, I think. I worked for an amazing human in Ann Goodman James, a top 100 coach, swim coach of all time, and also Jack Fabian, who was the Paralympic nationals coach, Greg Earhart, who is the owner and founder of Swim Cloud, all on one staff. And so that was really my formative 3 years. And then from there, I went on to start St. Norbert College. They restarted their girls program and offered a men's program. And that was like one of my favorite experiences because I had a chance to build Camelot. And it was funny because on paper, I was totally ready. Like I had been an NCAA coach. I have all these college degrees. I have all these credentials. I have like trials qualifiers. And I got there and I learned like very quickly like how unprepared I was to lead. And so I lasted there for about 3 years, and then I moved home to be closer to my family. And I had sworn never to coach again, actually. That was my swear. And then someone kept calling me, and eventually I ended up coaching high school. And I'm now in my 5th year of high school coaching, 5 league titles, only lost one meet in 5 years. And that's where we are today.
Love that. So we're going to come back to what you thought you knew, but I want to talk about this Army thing first. Undergrad, grad degree, the normal path is to go out into the workforce, and you're like, nah, let me join the Army. Talk a little bit about that. Share some of, was it like, OCS thing? Like, I'd love to get the whole take on it, what you learned there, why you did that, what you walked away with before getting back into coaching.
Yeah, so when I went to Chaminade, I definitely enjoyed myself and my free time an awful lot. And I spent all of my money, and I ended up finishing and moving back home, and I was very listless and I didn't have a lot of direction. And I was reading a ton of Hemingway, From the Bell Tolls, and what defines and what makes you a man. And so then I happened to go out to the bar with some buddies that were in the Navy, and they're talking about, hey, this paid for our grad school, and I had some grad school loans. And so I decided I was going to go check out the Navy. And I walked in the recruiting center on that very next morning, and the Navy door was locked. But to get to the Navy door, you had to walk past the Army door. And the recruiter stopped me and he's like, hey, you think about joining the Navy? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I can tell you about the military. I was like, oh, that's fine. I'll listen to you, hear you out. Then a week later, I was on my way to basic training. I enlisted, actually. I didn't go officer because I had a probably misguided idea, but perhaps it worked out for me in the long run about not wanting to be the top 1% or that kind of guy. Joined the Army, spent 4 years there, did a whole lot of stuff. I think what I really took away was it was an experience where I think for a lot of my life in college and leading up to it, I was incredibly selfish. I took a lot of what I had for granted. I did a lot of fighting and clawing, but you take what other people do for you for granted. So like I had an English teacher in Monterey named Miss Fern who just went out on a limb for me all the time. And Ken Fitro, who's still in our community, dealt with all of my swings through college and everything else. Even came on my college recruiting trip with me to make sure I landed a good place. And you don't think about that until you have to put your life in perspective. And joining the military definitely does that. And then the gift of that was I met people from all around the world in all kinds of different life situations. And it teaches you two things. Like one thing that like right and wrong is really a point of view issue. And also that every human, regardless where they come from, has something to offer. Whether or not you're willing to accept it or take it or learn from it's a different thing. But even your worst enemy can give you something valuable.
I'm sitting here chuckling based on some of the conversations we have in the office based on that statement you just made. But let's go back to this. All over 4 years, you met people from all over the world. Were you stationed domestically, internationally? Give me a little bit more background on that.
I was stationed domestically and then did some other stuff that's not podcast appropriate, I think. But for the most part, I actually worked with a really great team of military and civilians on a lot of projects that was really neat. And so I got a little bit of both worlds. I never had to wear dress uniforms, which was really cool. And I got to meet some really great people and learn some really good technical stuff that I can't say I use now, but at least like I got to see a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate the background on that. So let's go back to St. Norbert, and you led with this already,
Yeah.
knowing it's a question that I ask, but given the people you worked under and the background you had, you would think you were prepared and you got there. And what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out?
I think the first thing I realized was how good at the jobs my mentors were. Like how much I didn't have to deal with and how much I didn't see and how much I was just left to do X's and O's and recruit. So I think my strength really in all of college, my time in college was recruiting. I'm really good at separating people from their money and also like getting people in line to what our goal is. And I think I take a lot of pride in the fact that I looked in places where I came from where people wouldn't otherwise look. And so I am very blessed to have worked with all the kids I got the chance to work with. But what I didn't understand was once you got them on campus, like the idea of culture. Like I understood structure, but I did not understand the idea of how you build something and also how you lead with empathy and how you lead without fear. And I think for a long time, I just ran on that. You'll respect me because of my force of personality. And I think to some point, I ran myself down pretty rugged. And that's when I really started to learn. But I think that's the first thing I had to learn is that you have to set your boundaries, you have to lead with empathy, and you have to take care of yourself. And that was the real struggle.
You mentioned that earlier when we were exchanging some notes about learning how to set boundaries. I think often in our profession, education, when you're coming in fresh, you're young or inexperienced, right? Those things get blurred a lot, not because you're intentionally doing anything, but you just don't understand what that word even means. Talk a little bit about what that means for you, what you learned at each of those stops, and how that has evolved even until now, right where we're at in a place that has a whole lot of touch points and how you still have to try to figure out how to maintain that for your own sanity.
Yeah, so I started young, and I think I had a real bad understanding it was to be like a coach or even an authority figure. Like everybody's your friends, and it's a thin line when you start to interact with people in a way that isn't professional. And once you've broached it, you can't really pull it back. That goes with like athletes, but it also goes with like colleagues and things like that. And so when I got to different stops in Pennsylvania, like I really enjoyed the bar scene and things like that. And so I would run myself ragged. And I remember there was a point in Philadelphia where I was enjoying the party life a little too hard and it started to affect my work. And that was really a wake up call in the first time. And so I got past it a little bit and I went on to Colby, which is a much, much smaller town. There's a main street. No knocking Colby. I love my time there. But you think I would have learned, I did, but at the same time, like being young and being in my 20s, like I just kept indulging a little bit. And so you start to learn, like, all right, I set this boundary with these athletes, but professionally, I'm still going out to the bar with these other coaches and doing all these things and living a lifestyle that older, much more experienced coaches have done and have figured their stuff out. But I didn't have my stuff figured out. So I just kept going and going. Then finally, at St. Norbert, like being responsible for a program, I think what I really learned is that the boundary of this is my work life, this is my personal life. And this is the time I put aside for myself and my wife and the time I put aside for my job. And so with that, like you think that the boundary is the personal boundary. And so you put that up. But that boundary you don't place is about sacrifice. And so I thought if I sacrificed enough, if I worked enough hours, and if I partied hard to offset that success would come. And it didn't matter. Anything else didn't matter. Hangovers didn't matter as long as I was winning. And like at some point, cracks start to show, right? You're not the best version of yourself. Even if you are successful, you're not recognizing or appreciating that you've affected the people around you in a negative way. And that kind of became the boundary I needed to learn. Yeah.
So as you figured that piece out in college, right? You had whatever success you had there and left, right? Vowing to never coach again. Talk a little bit about reaching that conclusion. And right, we all go through these phases and age and stage of coaching. I know when I left Sacramento in 2008, I had got to a point where it was like, yeah, I'm done. I need some time off. And then by October, I found myself coaching two basketball teams at once because the coach asked, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So talk a little bit about how you reached that point and what were the triggers isn't the right word, right? But the things
Yeah.
that kind of made you reach a breaking point and what the plan was moving forward from there based on your track record.
First off, I was a very successful college coach. So just throwing that out there. But no, I think I didn't understand fully the weight of being someone's example and also being responsible for people underneath me. Like I was always a really good employee, but being a leader to another coach and things like that, I didn't really understand that. And to be honest, I think I spent a lot of my youth as very alpha male-ish, right? I'm strong enough. I'll push through this. I carried a lot of anger about my time in the army and some other things. And I think my answer to that was to numb myself and keep driving. And so it got to the point with my family, with my wife and everything else, where like continually making myself numb and like working hours that started at 5 a.m. and getting home at 9 p.m. and answering athlete calls at 3 a.m., which was great for them, I imagine, in some ways, but not good for my relationship and family. It became an issue of like, where do I want to put my energy? Do I want to be married to this amazing person that has infinite patience and supports me 100%? Or do I want to win? And like, knowing me as a personality, like the balance is difficult, but obviously it was being married and my dad was going through some health stuff. So it became an easy answer. Like it's choosing my wife, the person I love, and choosing my family. And so I moved back home to California with exactly zero plan, to be clear. Then to help my dad out, he had a hip surgery coming up that he was very reticent to get. And I needed to push him towards that. So that was plan one. And then I know I wanted to continue to teach. And I know that's a part of my personality. Actually, it's my dad. My dad is a hero in every single way. But his whole thing was, you have all these gifts. He says I'm very intelligent. Who knows the truth of that? But he always said it's a waste to do that and not give back somehow. To be bright and be successful is not the same thing as being truly successful in life. And he says this one thing, that success isn't climbing the mountain, it's climbing the mountain and reaching backwards and pulling somebody else up. And I think for the first 12 years of my life, I was just climbing a mountain and using other people for step stools and not considering the damage or impact I was making as long as I was climbing. Moving back was a chance to reach back. And so I got a chance to work my old middle school and do a lot of really cool things there. I worked for a nonprofit, CPY, for a year before coming to Stevenson. Actually, thanks to you and making an option for me. But so I think it was that. It was like realizing that this is my impact I'm having on everybody around me, my family, my loved ones, my colleagues, even the kids I was coaching, even though I think I was a decent coach. And it became a point where it's a sobering thing to wake up in the morning. And for me, know that you're not proud of the person you are and know that the bad you've done in the world outweighs the good in a lot of ways. Because winning is not good. It's a component of working hard, but it does not make you a good person. It's just part of it.
No doubt. You and I know this. We joke all the time in our profession. It's they're not putting your win-loss record on your tombstone. So at the end of the day, we may think they are, but they're not. So how do you transition into that next phase and what does that look like? And how are we trying, to your point, right? Be somebody that is the example, right? Of what you're trying to ask these kids to do. And I think that's the hard thing as you've described. I want to go with this. If you had this gap, let's call it, even if it
Mm-hmm.
was only a year or 6 months, whatever it might be, and you have different challenges with athletes at a high school versus a college, at a Stevenson versus a Monterey High, right? Whatever it might be. How would you describe some of the lessons you've learned transitioning back to the high school space versus the college space? What do you miss? What do you not miss? What are the things that make the high school experience great versus the college experience?
That's a good question. For missing things, I think I miss having a budget. And I don't mean that bad, like we don't have a good budget, but like at the college level, you have a large budget. And so when I was at St. Norbert, I lived Camelot for a hot second. Like we did yoga every Wednesday with a professional yoga teacher. We traveled to Colorado Springs to do a training trip. And so I miss like the bells and whistles of it. But at the same time, I think it enabled me to hide some of my shortcomings. Like you're able to prop up your shortcomings by saying, we're doing this cool thing, as opposed to being a good coach. So I do miss that part. I think with high school, the challenging but also the beautiful part of it is you don't choose your athletes. Like you inherit a team that comes. You don't recruit, you don't pick them, you get who shows up and wants to be there. And in some ways that's so beautiful because they want to be there. At college, kids take up I took a college opportunity at a school like I love St. Rose, but at the same time I wanted to go to Cal and Davis, right? St. Rose was a place I had to go because it enabled my life for the better in that huge scholarship offer I got. So I was not all the way in. I was a pain in the rear as a college athlete. High school athletes show up because they not because they have to, because they want to. And there's something really special about that. And the one thing I really value about the experience here at Stevenson is that we have kids from around the world. And so not only am I coaching, but I'm learning like cultures and things I never would have considered before. And I think that actually is the great fallacy of coaching. We often think of what we're imparting or what the results are, and it's all me centric. Like it's what I impart and what I change. And I think what I've really taken away and what I really value, even on the days where I'm working too late or this kid is late and I'm furious about it, or a kid says something stupid and I have to counsel them, it's that every time I interact with them, I'm learning about myself and my place in the world. And I'm really, in a lot of ways, getting to reconsider my view of the world. And I think you and I have shared this. Like I had, coming from Monterey High, which is a public school, like I had a very negative view of what private school is and what private school education is because I didn't understand it. I think the last 5 years, the greatest gift I was given was insight in that one, like your assumptions oftentimes are not real. Like you have a snapshot of the entire thing. And that goes for people, relationships, teams. You see a snapshot of one thing. And if you judge by that, you've robbed yourself of the opportunity to learn so much. But with kids, no matter what you think of parents or their background, or what do you think of affluence or not affluence, it doesn't really matter. Like kids are kids. And no matter where they come from, they're a gift and they can give you so much knowledge, information, and also hold a mirror up to your face and you can see where you're really failing. And I can tell you, as a high school coach, I fail more than I ever did as a college coach in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I think I'm more successful because I'm able to adapt to it.
Well, it's funny that you just brought that up because that was going to be my follow-up question where when we were first dancing around this thing, it was like, no, yes, listen. And it's what's the thing that you were most wrong about in your perception, especially for those of you that don't understand, like the Monterey Peninsula is a small place. Everybody knows everybody. And at the same time, you still have your perceptions of the neighboring communities, mostly because of rivalries and whatnot. And you're pretty dug in and entrenched in your neighborhood. But what would you say that 5 years now behind the curtain where you've gotten a look and you're just like, dude, I was so wrong about this. And just because to that point, we all make assumptions in relationship, in job opportunities. My daughter, God bless her, wants to be a lawyer, and she's been working for the DA the last couple of years as a victim advocate. And her uncle is a public defender, and I'm like, you should hit him up and go spend some time. Nah, I don't want to be on defense. It's you don't know what you don't know right now, and so it's that could give you perspective as a prosecutor, as a victim advocate, to understand the full spectrum. But you're so dug in that you're not willing to see that yet. But whatever, she's young. Back to your question. What's the thing you were most wrong about, and the thing that you would advise others based on this experience that like, hey, just pump the brakes and listen or see and peep something out.
Yeah, to unpack all that. First off, Plimo's daughter, you're doing a great job. I hope you find your path. Second part, I think what I was most wrong about was I assumed demographic, right? Like growing up here, I assumed that Stevenson was all rich white kids. And I always thought in coming in, they would never follow me. I'm from a very different background. I'm a man of color. In my sport, we're unicorns. There's not a lot of us. We're often seen as different. And I also run a very, what I thought was a college level program that's very regimented. And I thought there was no way high schoolers could ever adapt to it or even commit to it. And I felt that my whole shtick and stuff wouldn't work here, right? Like I'm a cult of personality at college. I recruit, they choose me, and then I lead them. Whereas here you just get them. My advice would be, I think, as you look at jobs like this, is to one, meet the kids first. Like I had said no to you 3 times without ever stepping foot on a practice or meeting one kid. And the second part of that is like when you meet the kids, be open to learning. Don't assume you know everything about them. Don't assume you know their background. Don't assume what they can and can't offer you because I'm incredibly wrong, or I was incredibly wrong. I think the greatest person I've ever coached was Percy Zhu, who is a captain as a senior in valedictorian at Stevenson. His first day, he could barely swim. And even then, he wasn't winning races by the time he was a senior. He was scoring 1 or 2 points here or there. But his profound effect on the program was that he was a silent leader. He modeled like empathy and compassion and leadership. And people followed him, even when he wasn't the fastest person. And that's one of the first times I've ever seen that. And that was super powerful. But as a human, even when I yelled at Percy because he wasn't going fast and things like that, he was calm and he took so much away from the program. And he, by the time he was a senior, he was parroting things back to me that I had said when he was a freshman that I remember saying. And just to see like that kid who is smarter than I ever was, will go on to do things greater than I've ever done, was taking things from me and remembering it and applying it to his life. And that was so powerful. I think it probably changed my coaching lifestyle and my lifestyle in a lot of ways.
So, as a college person, not that you are now, but we've both been there,
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever remember that type of situation being valued, embraced, even talked about. I know you and I have talked about two of the best leaders I've coached on my basketball team in 25 years are two guys that couldn't sniff the court. But they were so important to the culture of the team because they held people accountable and they had the respect of their teammates that I look for those guys now, those girls now that I'm coaching girls, like who can be somebody that uplifts the whole group. Now on our girls team this year, you have Juan Jin, who's a student body president, and Mina, who don't play very much at all, but like the kids will take their cues from the models of human beings that they are. Why doesn't that land the same way in college? Is there a place for that, or is it just not something that they even consider based on the level? Like, I'm curious now that you made that comment, and I've also had that realization over the last few years.
I think there's a place for it in college, but I think it's a long-term culture thing. I don't think it happens in 2 or 3 or 4. I think it's a 5-year thing. And I also think it depends on the level and how you're recruiting. In high school, you get a huge melting pot of people of all levels. And so if you run a really good program, then even the bottom of your pot is up at the top. Like they're all doing the same thing, they're getting the same kind of experience. At the college level, time is money, money is time. Like you don't necessarily have time to foster relationships at the bottom. And so they never get that chance to rise to the top. They never get the chance to be seen by the top. A lot of times walk-ons are just walk-ons. They don't get the full experience. And I think the differential is, and I'm sure there are great college programs that do this, but it's harder when you're doing it the roster of 50. You've paid and recruited 25 of them. You have to spend time with the money that you spent. And sometimes that means the other half of it falls away. And so they never get that same chance or that same window to step in. So I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right, let's circle back to something a little bit more formalized. And we talk about, you've listened to some of this, and we talk all the time. And the whole impetus of this show was to create like a digital database of mentorship and offer some real tangible things to people. So, what would you say is the best thing you do in your program that has the largest ripple effect on your culture that is potentially transferable for somebody else? I'm always curious to see what type of nuggets we could pick up.
So for a lot of my career, I think I assumed, and swimming is a sport, right? That it's numbers based. It's just times again. So I always put training as number one, planning as number two, and then culture is number three. And so the one thing we do really well now is that I flipped it in a lot of ways. Like I'm still like religious about my training. I still write out super cycles and things like that. But where I spend the most of my energy is on like the person human connection. And I find a lot of our success, we've won championships in the PCAL where we shouldn't have won them, is because like I write letters to them. I make a point to check in with them. When they fall down, I'm there to pick them up, even if it's not my job. And I think what I've learned is that it's very easy. This is a Frosty Hessen quote, which is my favorite quote we use all the time. It's very easy to make a good athlete. It's very hard to make a good person. And so for a lot of my career, I focus on the athlete piece of it. And I've really come along the way to saying, if you make good people and you put the effort into connecting with other good people, then success comes naturally. Like my kids from the top to the bottom are amazing and they'd run through a wall for each other. Maybe not for me, but for each other. And I think that is like the definition of success. And that's why you win when kids are willing to do things for each other and by extension, you. I mean, I think that's what it is. So my big takeaway is focus on culture first and then like team experience first and then go backwards to success after that. And another thing I've learned, and I'll just say this, you didn't ask me this, but I'm just you gave me the microphone, and I very rarely talk about myself, so I'm just relishing in it. I've kind of learned that calm is contagious. For my early part of my career, I was a yeller and everything else. I think I can count on my hand the amount of times I've yelled. And every year it's like maybe less than five, and it's when they've really earned it. By being calm, even in chaos, I think you and give them a lot of power to kind of take leadership moments where they need to step up and be the loud one. When you're not the loud one, kids get a chance to lead. And I think what we always assume is that, not assume, but I think as a male coach, like it's always go get them. It's that football mentality. Let's run through the wall. And more as this like people evolve and relationships evolve, and this generation of kids, like you're not going to reach all the kids that way. And what are we doing if you're not trying to find a way to reach every single kid? And that's what I think I really would say. As you learn to lead every new team, start to learn the personality and start adapting. Like what worked last year is not going to work this year. And if you try to do it last year, you're going to lose kids. And even losing the slowest kid on the team is a huge loss because of the personality. And what I said before, what they offer you as a person, what they offer the team as a people. So slow down. Don't rest on your laurels, because you rest on your laurels, you're going to lose kids and have a negative impact, even while winning, if you win.
For sure. And I think that's ultimately as I'm going to say get older, but the more experience you have as far as reps and seasons, you figure out that like the relational piece is important and is so much further ahead than anything else if you're really trying to grow human beings. It's like winning's great. Who doesn't want to do that? And at the end of the day, that stuff is fleeting. And the relationships that last us years beyond, right? Like you mentioned, your coach all through the college experience with you. I got an outreach from a kid today asking me about something that's going to be a senior in college that needed some help with a project. And it's, yeah, no problem. Talk to Tyler. He's better equipped to do that. And so then they were on the phone, right? So it's just like, how are you planting those seeds that we see blossom down the road versus the right now if we got to win this game? And I think that's just a shift you make as you get more reps under your belt, so to speak. We are fortunate, I think, that our kids are required to participate in something, right? So basically, 83% of our athletes are doing an athletic sport during their time here. And so, by nature of that, you get to walk around campus and see stuff going on all the time and steal tidbits if you're paying attention. And you know where I am in regards to sports specialization. So I always ask this: it's like, what have you learned watching other teams that aren't aquatics teams that you've been able to apply to your training and coaching?
Yeah, so I think I touched about a little bit before with the team aspect. And so I coach a very individualized sport. And if you pay attention to other teams, even our area, they coach that way. I think by getting a chance to like practice near the gym and hear the way at the end of every practice you guys do a call out, or like hearing people encourage people throughout practice and things like that. I think I started to take away that being a good coach and being a good team is universal. It's not down to the sport. And so those small details that like you do in the gym, or I walk by cross country and I see the way they train what I call a day 10, which is a long aerobic set. And so even though our sports are different, there's these little pieces you can piece together and bring back to you. And so now day 10s are part of my like training. Every 10 days we do it. And it's a cross country thing. And like the call outs at end of practice, we do it every practice, which is originally a basketball thing. So things like that. I think a big part of being on our campus with football is seeing the way they hold players accountable and they have players lean on each other. And so I've learned through that to take a step back. Even though my roster's not that big, like I empower my captains in a really big way. Like they run everything. Like my goal at warm up when you're ready for a meet is to walk away, knowing full well my leaders will lead it. And that's from watching football warm ups and the way they get warm ups and their kids lead it.
No, I love
It's
that.
a quilts, right?
Yeah, I want to go back to the specificity of aquatics. And you coach both polo and swimming, but I got what I'm always curious about two things, and I'm going to ramble a little bit. You parse it how you want. But number one, I feel like swimming, excuse me, that's not fair. Coaching pool-based sports is so unique in that you can't really be in there to demonstrate. And I talked to Frank about this a lot and watched him, and I watched John, I watched you and Alan, and I can't imagine trying to instruct something in basketball, but not being able to physically demonstrate or put my hands on somebody. And it's like, how do you navigate that? What have you learned over the years from a toolbox standpoint to teach from the deck while people are out there in the middle? It just fascinates me to no end.
Clearly, you haven't seen me rolling on the ground trying to teach a flip turn. But no, I think what you learn that's most valuable in aquatics is common language. And so like it's teaching that vernacular in the very beginning in the season and relying on it. So we talk a lot about in swimming, like your hand position, right? So you give them an analogy. So you're reaching over a barrel to pull backwards, and that's hand position. We use train tracks a lot. As you rotate your body, you want to stay on the train tracks and reaching through. You don't want to stay flat, but you want to rotate and stay on train tracks. So you become an expert in linguistics. Like it's how can I express this theory in a way they'll understand, and how do I set that language early on so we can all use it. So when I say train tracks and Alan says train tracks, the kid knows what we're talking about. So it's a lot of things like that. I think you're a lot heavier in the beginning of the season. Like I'm a fundamentals coach, like basketball a little bit, right? You dribble right way. Like you, when we first start, you're pushing off the wall. Every pushes off the same way. When we do this drill, every does it the same way. We do a set called Air Force that we do literally once a week. That's all about, and it's from Air Force Academy. Actually learned it from Casey Converse. God rest his soul, died this past year, but fastest man in the United States, first person under 1500, under 15 minutes in the 1500. But anyway, so it's this drill that I've learned from him that we do every day, and it's about how to leave the wall the right way, which is like the smallest thing in swimming, right? But it's we repetition, common language, and then building out from there.
All
And I
right.
think also, well, I'm sorry, last
No,
part.
no, go. I didn't thought you were.
I think it's respecting kids' intelligence. Like we have high schoolers that are in geometry and things like that. So I honestly have had to brush up my math terms. Like I was trying to say parabolic today, and I messed it up. One of the kids was like, "It's parabola," and I was like, "Okay, got it." So I think just learning that way and finding the common language based on what's going on in their life, and that is not just technique stuff; it's also like life stuff. I've never missed a season of The Bachelor because I had a hard time relating to my college girls teams, and so I started watching it so I have a common language to talk to them about something. Same thing with the HBO series of Girls. I not a lot of commonality to that, but I watched it because it gave me language to use with them. And I think finding their interest points and using them as analogies for what you want is a good way to do it.
God bless you. My wife and daughters watch that, and I walk into the other room. And the irony is, this is neither here nor there. I think season two, one of my college or my high school classmates was The Bachelor. So that was the only season I ever watched. But anyway, moving back. The other thing I'm curious about in track and field is similar, swimming, cross country, these team sports that are, I guess, they're individual sports masquerading as a team sport in regards to scoring. But how do you navigate that delicate balance where it's, yeah, this is about you dominating, and we actually need you to take one for the team over here? Talk about that dynamic because it's so different than the traditional team sports that I've been a part of.
Yeah, so I think a lot of ways, like regular team sports are like air hockey, whereas swimming's like a puzzle. And track is like that too. It's outlining like that even your fastest guy, because one through fifth matters. Like you can win a meet never winning a race. Like you can go two, three, four and win the meet. And so it's that early establishment early on that like everybody matters. Like every race matters. And so even your slowest guy knows that he can impact the meet by doing it. And once you've convinced them of that, a lot of things melt away. It's not Andy will save us or Patrick Powers will win this race. It's Patrick Powers will win this race and Zach Robinson has to get third and Jasper has to get fifth. And if we do that, we win. I think in swimming, you can go two ways. You can go the hyper individualistic way. And we see that a lot where it's just, I'm going to coach my stars. Our stars are going to carry us. And that's those teams that get second and third place to me. Because I think when you have your stars understand that the way they train, the way they lead, the way they get the next person in, we celebrate fifths just like we celebrate thirds and fourths. The fifth is a 1 point, and that matters a ton. And I think you have to be really deliberate. So if you watch a swim meet and you look around at a high school meet, a lot of times you'll see people on their phones, kids not watching races, they're waiting for their event to come. And I think that's a really common thing. One great amount of pride I take in my sport when I do is that our kids understand from the minute the meet starts, they are in. If I see their phone, I always threaten to throw it in the pool. I know you'd hear that phone call. I don't actually do it.
They're waterproof now. That's not going to
Yeah.
phase them.
So they're not allowed to have phones on deck. And then anytime one of their teammates is in the water, they have to be standing up. They're not allowed to sit down. They have to be up yelling. And so by that way, you manufacture that same team motivation. I think with individual sports like track and swimming, you just have to be creative. You have to take away what's normal in their everyday, which is isolate and separate, and force them to be part of something. And it's a hard pull the first couple meets. There's a lot of that's usually when I do yell or like I lean in the captain. I'm like, get them off the ground. But once you get that culture going and once it becomes ingrained in them, the things without your like impact of you saying get up right now are incredible. And I think that's why we are successful as a team.
Yeah, it's something that unless you've been in that type of sport, right? I coach cross country and I coach golf, but it's just such a different dynamic. The golf analogy is when you're on the golf team, you can't take exotics because you're chasing a low score. Like you just got to be okay with the bogey.
Yeah.
And it's a similar deal, right? Where it's, yeah, we don't need you to win. We just need you to finish third. And it's just an different dynamic than the team sports. I love the way you describe that. All right, I'm going to give you the easy one that you've prepped for. What's something you've most recently changed your mind on? And truth be told, I don't really care about the coaching component of it. This is more about how we challenge our belief system, and especially in the polarized environment that we all live in today. How are you purposefully challenging something that you have held to be true, right, in a growth mindset type of way versus the echo chambers that exist all around us?
I love that you, and knowing that I'm prepared, you asked the question that I had not prepped ahead of time and you keep doing it. So if this interview is disjointed, it's because I had to plan it and you threw me off.
And I
So
told you I was going to do that. So that's okay.
I hope it's usable. I think for me, professionally as a person, and I can happily and proudly tell you that I'm a work in progress in 1,000 different ways. And I think what I'm really changing my mind on is I like being right. Like I love data. I love driving numbers. I like being able to point to something and say, this is this because of XYZ. And the more I spend time in this world and time around people that I otherwise would probably have never met or interacted with, I've learned that there's being right and then there's being helpful and driving a mission forward. I can oftentimes be right, but in being right and how I handle that and saying that I am right, I hurt the mission or I affect somebody else's ability to function. And I'm having to learn, and I'm not there yet, that being self righteous makes me feel better for half an hour if I'm lucky, right? Or in that moment when I turn on that kid or I yell at a colleague who did something wrong, in my opinion, but perhaps they did something that they think helps the mission. Whereas being part of a bigger thing where I'm able to let go of self and perhaps learn something from someone that I've otherwise been closed off to because I don't agree with them personally, politically, or how they coach or things like that. By allowing myself to be open to that, and I'm still working on it very much, I think you get a long-term joy out of that. It's not just the minute-to-minute joy. It's the a year from now I can look back and say that was the right thing to do, even though if it wasn't the way I thought it was right at the moment. And I think letting go of self and ego is a big part of that, and accepting that we can all be different, right? We all have different belief systems. It's the ability to see somebody as a human first and then start there and go backwards. And a lot of times, starting with the human and going backwards, you're not going to get to the things that you don't like about them because every person has all these beautiful things to offer you. And it's hard to see that sometimes when you don't agree or you don't like the things they do, or maybe you don't like the way they look because they're not the same person as you. Where I'm from and my background and who I am runs in opposition to some other people, and I understand that. But if you let them be a person and then the rest of the deals flow in, I'm willing to bet 99% of the time you're going to find that beautiful thing about them and they're going to add to your life before you get to the stuff that upsets you.
Yep. Yep. Love that. Let me ask you this as a friend and colleague and fellow coach, right? In
Yeah.
the things that you have to offer the world that you observe, what's something that you do that I should do?
That you should do? Oh, that's a
Coaching, interactions on campus, teaching, whatever it is. But you just, you've had all this time to observe and you're like, hey, man, Climo, just let me give you this and you can get out of your own way.
nothing, boss. You're wonderful. Keep me employed. Now,
For
so
those of
I'll
you
offer this.
listening, that's never the right answer. Feedback is a gift, and you should
Yeah.
all be seeking it out constantly.
I do a lot of work in equity and inclusion, things like that. And a lot of times we label the idea of code switching as a negative thing. And I think it is sometimes. But I think the ability to adapt your message while maintaining the content, but changing it for the audience, even if kind of we talked about before, right? Even if you're in opposition to them in every way, appealing to that one beautiful thing you find and adapting the message in a way that in some ways plays to their ego and plays to that beautiful thing you found, I think you can sometimes get further. even if it's a hard conversation, it's someone that you're not inviting out for beer. I'm sober for 4 years, so maybe not inviting for beers, but not inviting for pizza later. I think that pause and letting someone, one, swing themselves out and be honest, and then two, getting your message across in a way that is tailored for them by code switching a little bit can sometimes get you further than just being right. Not that you do that all the time, but it
No,
is
I
important.
think it's important. And I think that the vulnerability to go to somebody and ask them for help at any point in your life is something that we're all working on. And so it's something that I actively do, but I guess only in the things that are high priorities for me, right? So ultimately, I had to have a conversation today with a colleague that was going to be uncomfortable. I went to my boss and I'm like, yo, I need help on this. This is where I'm at. This is my frustration. Coach me on how I'm supposed to have this conversation, which is in essence a code switching thing to meet them where they are and to deliver whatever I'm trying to get across to them. It speaks exactly to what you're saying, right? But that was something that was like sand in the shoe for me, right? It's this is
Yep.
bothering me. I got to go deal with this versus something that's I don't care if I ever have them on my team. It's a different deal. And that's really what you're speaking to, right? It's if you silo your message only to people that are in the immediate periphery of what is important to you, right? You're missing the opportunities to have a greater impact. So I appreciate the honesty as we always go back and forth on things. I think that's a great piece of advice. All right, I'm gonna give you one more to end on that you definitely haven't prepared for because I'm sitting here because you did prep for the interview, so you covered most of the questions interwovenly without me having to ask them. So I got to go off script here. So I'm
Yep.
looking through my notes of my question bank, and I'm gonna give you this one. What one small act of kindness from someone contributed to your success that you will never forget?
Dude, there's so many things.
Pick one
One small act of kindness.
that contributed to your success that you have never forgotten or you never will.
There are a lot of them, but I'll use this one. Actually, this is not flattery for you, but it's true. I think in my life I've done a lot of things, both good and bad. I've left damage, I've left impact, I've been amazing at some things. But when I left college coaching, I was incredibly sure I'd never coach again. And for good or worse, my personality flaws, my demons, everything else, I do think I'm really good at coaching and it's a way I can give back. And had when I moved back, you not called me lots of times and forced me, this aspect of myself, which brings me by far, I mean, my children are first, then my wife, and then coaching. That's what brings me the most happiness. And had you not kept pursuing me and pushing me into it, I think I would have lost a big part of who I am. And I think I would have not made a huge impact on a lot of kids. I think all of the bad I did and all the lessons I learned from that would have been for nothing. I think the negative impact would have been that. And now I have this opportunity to not turn, because you don't ever undo bad things, but I think I have a chance to learn from them and really take what scars I carry and use them to help other kids. And without you not letting me quit on myself, which is actually a youism, something I say all the time now, which is it's so easy to quit. And once you do it once, you can't stop doing it. If you quit something you're really good at, what happens with the thing that's inconvenient or uncomfortable, right? Then it's even easier to quit that. And so by you not letting me quit, and Ken Pitcher in some ways, you've definitely impacted my life. And coaching in the kids have impacted my life in a way that I would never have been open to. So I think that's the biggest kindness. Like it gave me a chance to give back and continue giving back when I felt I didn't have that opportunity, and nor did I feel I deserved it.
I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you're here. Our kids are benefiting, right? The whole school benefits because you've now integrated yourself into so many aspects of the school that it is transformational, the impact that you've had, whether you realize it or not. Know that it was well worth the investment of time to continuously harass you and not take no for an answer. I'll give you a lighter hearted one to finish on. Best tool you have recently adopted, either in your professional life, in your coaching life, in your personal life. I'm always, as the AD especially, I'm always trying to figure out how to be more efficient at certain things. And so my favorite go-tos are Calendly, right? Linktree, things like that, that make things seamless. What about you and any of the things, especially with tech?
Yep.
moving a mile a minute. What are some things that you've adopted lately that you're like, damn, if I had this 20 years ago, life would be real easy?
So we've always had word processing and spell check and things like that, and I've always used them. But there's nothing quite as amazing, and this is vilified in a lot of ways, to write an email and then plug into Chat GPT and say, hey, I'm writing this to parents and I want the tone to be this. Or can you spot any phrases or turn of phrases that may not translate well in a translator? And so every email I do, I run it that way because I have athletes from internationals. And so I used to write these emails that were like long when I love to write. I'm a writer. But I never really considered that like when you translate that in Google Translate or a different app, the message was usually lost or very jumbled. So having this tool, we're working with international athletes to ask my emails, how does this translate, and to speed it back and forth to me so I can read it, has really enabled me, I think, hopefully, to bring families along because I think no athlete is an island. Like you can win, I don't know, Sally, right? But if Sally is going home and the parents are like, dude, Climo is the worst, don't listen to anything he says, no matter how great your message is, if you haven't won Sally's family, be it parents or grandparents or adopted parents, whatever it is, then they're only getting halfway to that kid. So having ChatGPT as a tool to say like, how is this landing, particularly different languages, I think if you don't do that, you're probably being irresponsible. I think you need to take the chance to make sure your message is received in a lot of ways.
But I think that's the generational fear is that what are we going to teach? And it's part of this is just teaching people how to use tech, right?
Yeah.
And I've never thought about it in the way in which you just described. And I showed you an email that I used it for today to help my daughter, right? And to consolidate some data. I'm using it to plan a presentation that I'm giving at the AD conference next week and recapture some things, but that's genius. Like, how is this going to translate? Great. That's going in my toolbox, man. I appreciate you sharing that. It is late. It is 8:30 on a Friday night. Not everyone would take the time to do this, so I appreciate you doing that, but I'm going to let you get back to your family. Kids are probably asleep by now, but that gives you a little QT elsewhere.
Thank you. You might think that, but I can still hear them in the background. So I'm sure you did too. So I'm going to go lay on the bedroom floor with my 2 and 4 year old and do the best thing I do all day, which is put them to bed.
Nice. All right, coach. I'll talk to you soon.